So thanks so much for joining this virtual live Boulder Startup Week session on marketing analytics. Very excited about this. Analytics is very close to my heart. My name is Ben Travis. I'm this year's marketing track captain, as well as marketing manager at Bonusly here in Boulder. And this Boulder Startup Week is, as you can tell, not in person, but a 100% digital event with the theme of service to community. And this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube for reference in the future. Before we start, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. So many thanks to Techstars, Honey, Name.com, Downtown Boulder Partnership, and CU for their sponsorship of Boulder Startup Week. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. Now I'm very excited to introduce Shivani Bhatt of Adobe. I don't know if anyone was here last year, but Shivani gave a really great talk to kick things off for Boulder Startup Week's marketing track session. And I think it's very fitting because she is wrapping things up for the marketing track this year. So very excited. Shivani, take it away.
Thank you. All righty, I'm going to quickly share. And okay, can everyone see my screen? Just want to double check. Okay,
yeah,
cool. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, as Ben noted, I gave a talk last year and it was focused around digital marketing 101 for startups. And it's actually a course I used to teach at General Assembly. And this year I wanted to focus on marketing analytics since I run a marketing analytics team at Adobe. And I thought it would be really helpful to focus on best practices to support scaling, because I think that's probably what a lot of you are focused on right now. So brief cover off on what we'll be looking at today. So last year in the talk, there was a gentleman that raised his hand and said, you know, this is really helpful, I'm appreciating it, but what are the 5 things I need to focus on marketing-wise yesterday? And I think that really speaks to the startup mentality. So this year, I'm actually gonna kick us off with that. So I don't want you guys to have to wait till the end. We're gonna kick off with a checklist, and then we'll get into additional context. So we'll go over marketing analytics frameworks. And then I do this at any talk I give because I think it's really, really helpful. I try to do a live case study. This year it's going to be a little bit of an adventure because we're going to do it live. I'm going to ask for a volunteer. So I'd love to hear from someone in the audience if you're really actively workshopping your analytics program or something like that right now and you want to have us all work it together. I think that's a great way for us to approach. So if you're interested, go ahead and put that in the chat right now, and Ben can review, and we'll try to look at that ahead of time a little bit. And also, this is to serve as a heads up that I like volunteers, so you're not shocked later on. And then after we wrap up the case study, we'll go into a Q&A session. And at that time, if there's anything we didn't cover that you'd like to, you're welcome to bring that up. Okay, so I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about me and why you should listen to me. And while I'm doing this, it would be wonderful if you're able to just drop into the chat a little bit about you, where you work, what your role is there, and what the company is. I'm really trying to understand the audience makeup. So, you know, if there's a lot of marketing folks in the audience, I can focus more on that stuff. If it's more of a founder or, you know, non-marketer, but interested in this audience, then, you know, we can focus on that as well. So let's see. Like I said, run a marketing analytics and data operations team at Adobe. Prior to that, I worked in marketing automation. I've worked in demand gen roles, have also launched marketing operations teams. So marketing analytics is really just sort of an amalgamation of all of that, and that's why I love it. I am a CU Boulder MBA, so go CU, go Buffs. And then during my MBA, I also ran a consulting firm that focused exclusively on startups. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is resultant of conversations that I've had with startups and what they need to focus on to scale. And like I said, I also taught a little bit at General Assembly, so have that side of this class as well. Last but not least, I love music, so I'm a big music fan, and I'm also a musician. So I am in a Denver rock band called Dakota, and I think probably this link will be sent out afterwards. So if you're interested, you can click on that, and that'll take you to our Spotify. Okay, and I'm just gonna glance. I can see in the chat.
Looks like we have a lot of folks from digital marketing,
Okay.
marketing operations, product development, marketing advisor, which is pretty neat.
Okay.
We also have folks in the food and beverage space.
Okay.
Analytics consultant.
Wonderful. Cool. So it's a good mix of folks. Cool. So keep thinking about your analytics track, and we'll take an audience member later on. Okay, so I'm going to start off with 5-point checklists because, like I said, I think that's probably the most critical thing to start with. So there are basically throughout this presentation, I'm going to focus on person-based funnels and then account-based funnels. I think that that's a really important division nowadays because back in the day, you know, it was sort of just, we've got a marketable database, let's you know, get them through the funnel. And now I think there's a bit of nuance into how you can do that. So the person-based checklist is based on more of a broad marketing funnel. This is, you know, individuals moving through different stages of their customer journey and then, you know, landing at a decision before purchase. So here is a overview of I think the top 5 metrics you need at a person level to scale. One note for the marketers in the audience, you may be thinking, this is really oversimplified. I think personally, there are so many, you know, we can go really, really deep on so many different channels. We can say, you know, here's what I want to focus on web, on email, and events. And that's really not what I wanted the takeaway from this presentation to be. I wanted it to be, you know, what are the most important things you need, and then, you know, there are always supporting operational KPIs that fall under that, but I think this is you know, if you can track these 5 things, it's a really good pulse on where you should be and how your business is going to be able to scale. So the first metric there is net new names, and this is primarily coming, I think, from your web channel. So really what I want you to focus on is your website converting into new names? And you're obviously going to have some churn on your database. You know, you need to have that influx of new names as you go along. So that's the first metric that kind of captures that top of funnel element. Then you want to look at marketing qualified leads. Sure, there's lots of different names for this, but you know, I'm just going to call it MQLs for here. You can call it what you may in your own organization, but I'm hoping that this is helpful. I also seem to have a neighbor that just decided to do some home improvement projects next door. I hope you guys can hear me all right. Ben, let me know if it's super loud and I'll try to sneak away to another part of my house.
Yep, sounds good so far.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you're obviously for your marketing qualified leads, you're going to be focused on web, email, and events. This is really an engagement metric. Are you engaging the prospects in your database? Then you want to look at sales accepted opportunities. So are those marketing qualified leads actually converting into sales accepted opportunities? Again, I think this is a mix of channels. Now, the conversion rate is really important. You know, metrics 2 and 3, I think, are volume based. So you're going to want to look at, you know, like the counts, just sheer numbers of what you're generating week over week, month over month, whatever your cadence may be. The conversion rate, I think, is really, really strong when you can look at it over a rolling 4-week average. So this is basically telling you in the last month, how am I doing? If you see that conversion rate fluctuating over time, that's okay, that's probably natural, but I think if you can track it in that way and maybe even, you know, tag what it is each month, you have seasonality there that's captured, and then also you're kind of getting an understanding of how am I converting my marketing qualified leads? Are they actually turning into opportunities? And then last but not least, average sale price. I think this is just really critical. I think it's really important, especially as you scale, probably want to see that average sale price rise. So it's good to keep track of it. It's I think also a really good funnel indicator in tandem with the conversion rate. So this is probably a great place to pause and see if there are any questions. Okay, I'm going to take silence as a no and keep on going through. So the next version of marketing metrics is going to be account-based. So this is when you are targeting specific accounts, you are moving accounts through those different stages before they finally land at a purchase. So account level metrics to scale. So typically what I've seen with this type of approach is that you have a list of sales named accounts where they're saying, okay, here are the accounts that we want to focus on. This is our universe. Marketing, we need your help to convert as many people at these accounts. Maybe there's a motion of, we got to convert specific people at that account, that type of thing. So these metrics are focused on that account-based view. This might be more common if you're more of a tech startup. I'm seeing this a lot more, where there's obviously still a person element to the account level, but it's very much focused on, are we getting the right accounts in, and then progressing them through the funnel. So you're obviously going to develop the sales named account list in partnership with sales. But then once you've got that list, which you obviously need to get started, then you want to look at engaged accounts. And so these are going to be accounts that are engaging across different channels: web, email, events. Again, there may be a few other channels in there that you're looking at, but I think this is really where the bulk of that marketing activity nowadays happens. And then again, you want to look at, are those engaged accounts, are there opportunities that are cropping up at that level? So you've got, again, web, email, event, engagement, but is that converting into a number of opportunities? Again, you want to look at the conversion rate. So are you engaging a ton of accounts, but your conversion rate to opportunity is really low? Probably going to hear about that from sales. So, there's different motions you can put in place there. And then again, average sale price. So not too different, but again, the account focus is really, really critical here. I'm going to pause here for any other questions that may have popped up. Okay, gonna keep on marching. Okay, so I want to go over a few different marketing analytics frameworks. So I think there are a lot of different customer journey frameworks out there. This is, again, I simplified this. I think probably all of you are going to have you might have additional stages, you might have more post-sale stages, that's okay. But I wanted to point out here, what's happening at each of these stages and how these metrics make sense here. So in the awareness stage, obviously, as a startup, I think it's really, really critical to focus on building out your marketing database. So that's obviously what you're doing here. That's what ties with that new name metric. Then as you get later down into the funnel, you're going to look at engagement across channels. So this is, again, omni or multi-channel, but you're looking at, okay, am I engaging people? Are they interacting with us? Are they downloading things, et cetera, et cetera? Another thing that comes in here is lead scoring. I think that's obviously the base level of what's going to be qualifying your leads, but if you don't have a lead scoring program, you may be looking at different types of engagement. Then as you move from that consideration stage into decision making and moving towards purchase, that's really where you want to focus on lead quality and opportunity creation. I think probably for all the marketers in the room, this is where we live, right? It's am I generating enough leads? But if I'm generating enough, is sales happy with them? Are they converting? And then are they converting into opportunities? And that's the real holy grail there. And then last but not least, I wanted to include a little bit here in the decision purchase stage. Some of you might also focus a little bit on deal acceleration, and deal size is reviewed at this stage. Deal acceleration is probably, if there's going to be a sixth metric on your five metric checklist, deal acceleration would be the sixth, I think, in my opinion. This is obviously, difficult to track, but I think as you mature as in an organization and as you scale, it's really important to get that deal velocity as fast as possible. So deal acceleration, really, I think, in my opinion, is around field marketing or events that you're running, targeting the right opportunities, and then getting them to close faster. So I want to talk a little bit about person-based journey frameworks versus account-based frameworks. I think there's some really key pros and cons to each. So if you're an early stage startup, I think I saw in the Q&A that someone had just launched, or maybe it's an early stage startup. You're putting together. I'm forgetting what it is, but I think it was some kind of food and beverage type startup. So if you're at that early stage, person-based is really where you need to start, right? Account-based, I think, is you can do that when you've got a list of leads and contacts to pull from. But if you're still building that out, person-based is the way to go. So you want to focus on, again, net new name conversion from your website. And then this is really where you're looking at high velocity and high engagement. So you want, once you've gotten people's contact information, you want to focus on email nurture programs, high engagement, content that gets them moving through, gets them qualified marketing leads, and then send them over to sales. Last but not least, I think a key pro to person-based marketing funnels is that they're really helpful in assembling a large buying committee. So, if you, again, are an early stage startup and you're still maybe figuring out exactly what the right persona is, the person-based funnel is really going to be helpful. And I just got a question. Let's see. When you say new names, how are you assuming visitors are giving you their names? Okay, great question. So what I mean by this is you should have some form of capture on your website. So whether that's maybe, I think if you're maybe like a health or wellness type startup, a good example of this would be, we've got an offer, we'll give you 15% off on XYZ product, or maybe even it's a course or something like that. People have to give you their email address and their first name and their last name in order to receive that offer and that discount, and that's how you should be grabbing their information. Obviously, if you're maybe more of a tech-based startup, you might be focusing more on content, so it might be a white paper, an infographic, something like that. I highly recommend emailing that content to people because it confirms deliverability of that email address and confirms the integrity of your database. Does that help answer the question? My question box kind of disappeared, but Ben, let me know if that didn't help. Oh, okay, and cool, that helped. And then cons, I think, of a person-based funnel. Persona can be tough because you've got a lot of different people in that database, and it can be difficult if you don't request a ton of information from them, which sometimes is just a necessity. It can be difficult to start to actually sort out who are the different personas in your databases. What are their job titles, or what are their use cases, if you're not job title focused. So that can be a little tough. That's okay. There are ways around it. But I do think it's important to be aware of that going in. You can also lose the account focus here. So I do think it's really important, especially if you're in the tech space, require that account name. You can suss it out with, domain, but it's a pain and it's going to require a lot of manual effort. So if you can just get the account name in and do some fuzzy matching even, I think that's the best way of approaching that. But it is a con if you're very, very person focused. And then last but not least, I think sales buy-in can be a little tough on the on the person-based funnel. So be aware of that. I think it's really important to just make sure that, again, the integrity of your database is strong and that you're doing everything you can as a marketer to capture the right information and even update it, every 6 months via, requiring the same information again from someone and just saying, is this correct, or things like that. That gets into just setting up your demand generation and your marketing automation, which we can touch on, but I wanted to focus a little bit more on analytics here. But if we do have questions on that at the end, I will be happy to take them.
Looks like we got one question from Shiro in the chat.
Okay, great. Let's see. ABM. Okay, so the question I've got is, for ABM, how big does the team you're trying to market to classify if it's account-based versus person-based? How big does the team? That's a great question. I think what you're asking is, like, how big does the marketing or the sales team have to be? So let me know if that's not right. But what I would suggest is, you can actually do this with a very scrappy team. You can do account-based marketing with like a 2 to 3 person marketing team. It's a lot, but it's possible. What I would suggest here, and actually I'll use the pros and cons to kind of address this question as well. The biggest thing here, I think, is that I typically see this account-based motion happen with later stage startups. The reason is that your database is just a little bit more developed. So you have more accounts in there, you have a little bit more information on the accounts, and so you can really go through that with sales and say, okay, who is the top priority this year? There's also a market research function that kind of has to go along with that. You're going to have to do some research on who the companies are, what's their annual revenue. There's a little bit of that sizing that happens there, but that can be coordinated between a marketing ops and sales ops department for sure. So it can be, a scrappy team, and it's still possible. I think the other thing to focus on there is that the account focus really means that you're having very specific and very clear targeting, especially as you're getting into the later stages of the funnel. You can develop content specifically for 5 accounts, and that's what you're sending them. Obviously, you typically see a little bit more engagement with that type of hyper-focused content. The other pro, I think, of account-based is that your buying committee is your sole focus in marketing and sales. So you can really spend time saying, I need to find the right person at the right account, and then that's who I'm going to market to. So there's a push there. Again, that smaller marketing team can focus on that. But it kind of gets me into the cons, which is that I think just naturally when you're hyper-focused on a specific list of accounts, you're gonna miss a few organic opportunities. And so that, I think, for startups specifically can be a risk, because at this point, you want to be revenue focused and growth focused. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think there's also high content turnover and creation costs, mainly because of what I mentioned before with focused targeting. So if you're hyper targeting a piece of content for 5 accounts, it might be difficult to convert that, to a different content piece for someone else. Or if you're a small team, it might essentially take a little extra time. And so you kind of have to figure out exactly how targeted you want to go in that sense. And then last but not least, pivoting to a person-based motion from an account-based motion can take a little transition time. So it's not necessarily like you can just flip a switch and you're back to person-based. Personally, I strongly recommend a mix of both sides. I think there's always room for each year, each quarter, maybe even each half, these are our top accounts and we want to have a motion set to that. I think if you're a smaller team, but you're really focused on growth and you need to get the average sales price up, that can be a really strong way to go. But I think if you're earlier stage and you're still focused on getting some of that foundational database work done, then start with the person-based, shift to account-based, or add that in as you have time. Does that help on the question? Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's keep us moving. We're going to jump to our case study. So we're going to talk through which approach makes sense for a startup, someone in the audience. So we're going to talk through person or account-based approach. And I'd love, if we can do this, to focus on a startup that is in the audience today. So Ben, do you see any notes in the chat from anybody that maybe earlier in the call said, yeah, I'm interested in this? And if not, no worries. But I would ask everyone, if you're able, if you're not too nervous, to chime in and raise your hand for a volunteer here.
Looks like we don't have any volunteers yet, but definitely happy to bring some folks into the conversation. So it looks like Stump says, I'm a founder, and then Shiro says, I can volunteer.
Okay.
So yeah, Shiro, let me unmute you real quick. And you should be able to talk now.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, good, thanks for joining.
Hey there.
Thanks for hosting this. This has already been super helpful, thank you.
Good. All right, so your name is Shira. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Shiro.
Shiro, okay, thank you. I can only see part of your name, so.
Oh,
Shiro.
no worries, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so Shiro, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, the company you work for, and your role at the company?
Yeah, so my current title is Digital Marketing and Demand Gen Manager, and it's at Cadence. It's a cybersecurity training software from Boulder, Colorado. And basically what makes us unique is we've gamified a lot of training aspects of cybersecurity roles. And we're all online and on the cloud. So that's kind of what makes us unique.
Okay, wonderful. That's really great. Awesome. So let's hear a little bit about your current approach. So, what does your marketing mix look like, and what are you maybe one of your challenges that you're currently facing right
now? So I have a pretty complicated marketing stack, I'd say. I'm doing a lot of LinkedIn advertising, as well as a webinar hosting. And so working with partners and getting registrants to our webinars. I'd say those are our two biggest lead generation tactics at the moment. Okay. But on top of that, we have like our organic website and other organic channels. And I'd say one challenge right now is definitely what you were saying earlier about pipeline velocity. And another is just kind of like getting a hold of people, which is kind of a blend between marketing and inside sales. But with given my role, it's been a part of my responsibility, but it's been really hard to do that.
Yes, definitely. I think you are 100%, mentioning something that a lot of companies struggle with. So, getting people to convert is that inside sales function, and that's really critical. So glad to hear that you're working through that. I know it's challenging, but maybe we can touch on that a little bit in this case study. So, I think it's really great to hear your marketing mix. And the item that you said that I really thought was great was the getting people to register for webinars. I think that's just an age-old marketing challenge. So I'd actually love to hear from everyone. And Shiro, you can also chime in here since it's your case study, but I'd love to hear from people on what they think the best approach is. So should we focus on person or account? And just like maybe one bullet on why you think we should focus on person or account.
I guess I would focus on person for this one, just because I think whatever information they're looking for, I think I like webinars when they're very specific, and I think person based marketing would relate to a specific need or pain point.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Sorry, could you repeat one more time? So which one we think would be most appropriate?
Yeah. I'm looking for an opinion. There's not necessarily a wrong answer here. So I'm looking for an opinion from folks. You can just put it into the chat on whether you think Shiro should focus on the person-based approach or an account-based approach. Okay, so I'm seeing some comments. This is great. Okay, so I've got one from a Kevin. It looks like, it sounds like account-based approach since his product appeals to companies as a whole. So I think this is a really good call out. I think that, and I'm seeing some other questions or comments in here that I'll touch on as well, but I think that it's a really good call out. Account-based, I do think, Shiro, is really helpful for specifically tech companies because you're able to sort of focus on a specific universe that sales has agreed, like, yes, I want leads from these accounts. And it's less a question of how is my entire funnel doing? It's a question of, did I do what I was supposed to do on these 10, 15, 100, whatever it may be, on those accounts? And so I do think it's a good approach that you may consider. You may also feel like, you know what, we're just not ready. That's totally fine. But I do think account-based is helpful when you are specifically in a tech company because it allows you a little bit of flexibility on your basically your content and you know, to your point about getting people to register for webinars, you may even be able to put on specific webinars for specific client options. Or prospects that are saying, here are my top 3 cybersecurity concerns. So just a thought there. Let's see, we've got a few other thoughts around account-based. Got someone, Gabe, I think, yeah, Gabe, saying larger companies are needing this. I think that's a good call out. And then I'm also seeing person-based because it'd be your initial in. Okay, so this is a really good comment. I do want to talk a little bit about. And when it looks like, Doris, you also mentioned it helps if you're an advocate in the company. I love that. So yeah, I think another thing that's really helpful when considering which approach here is that who is my in? So, when you are focused or if you're doing sort of a mix, you can focus on specific people at the account that are, maybe there's someone, IT manager, I'm just going to throw a random title out there, but IT manager 1, responds, converts to there's an opportunity under her name. And, we can say, okay, this person is an advocate. They're really, really key to the sales process. And that person ends up being the reason that, they open the door to other contacts at that account and so on and so forth. So do think there's a really good, point here that we can really do either. Like I said, there's no right or wrong approach, but I think it's just kind of taking stock of your company objectives, what the key priorities are, and then focusing a person or account or a mix of the two approaches to your objectives that year. Shira, do you have anything to add or any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really been what I think I've been doing account-based marketing. This kind of goes back to my last question of at what point. So a lot of times we'll get a lead and, we'll figure out that the person is an influencer in the company, but not a decision maker. And so like, as the lead is handed off to inside sales, gradually more contacts will be added to that opportunity. We use Salesforce, by the way. So like all these contacts start getting added to this opportunity. And once there's several contacts applied to that opportunity or account, and then you start marketing to them, is that considered account-based marketing? I
Yeah,
guess
I
I just
think,
don't know the fine line.
no. I think that's a really good call out. I think that it definitely falls under the umbrella for sure. And this kind of gets back to that point that I made at the beginning, which is that, sometimes it just depends on what stage your startup is in. If you're early stage, um, you may be focused more in person because you just need to build up the database. And what you mentioned is exactly, it's a good example of that. That once you're able to kind of add a few more people and contacts at that account or at that opportunity, you're able to develop more specific content for them. And that account-based motion at that point kind of becomes more of a deal progression motion. You may already have an opportunity, but you're focused on speeding up the days to close on that. So there may be something targeted that you do. It may even, it may not even be a webinar. It may be like a focused demo or a trial or something like that. But that all falls under that account-based category. The reason I split it out this way in this talk was because I think it's important to kind of consider them separately and then see how you want to throw them together. I think if both of these versions of approaching different marketing funnels, if you mash them together, it can get kind of tricky to suss out like what is actually happening in my mix and what are the metrics I need to focus on. So this is again a guideline. A lot of you may say, I kind of need to do both, and you may mash together the metrics checklist that I gave you. That's okay, but yeah, I think the point of splitting it out this way was kind of to give people a clear perspective.
I like it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for joining me for the case study. Like I said, I think it was meant to be kind of an adventure with this virtual setting. Normally when I do them, it's live and people are talking, and it's kind of nice to take a break from just me talking at you for a while. Anyways, so that's what I had today for all of you. And I did reserve about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So I'm happy to take questions if people have them now. And if you want to, if it's more of a conversation, I'm fine with that too. We can unmute different folks. Or if we want to stick with the chat function, we can do that as well. But thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you all are safe and healthy and not losing your mind too much in quarantine.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shivani. And as we get questions that roll in, what would be the best way to, if folks wanted to continue the conversation with you, to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can pass around my my LinkedIn. Actually, that'd probably be the best way. And then we can communicate that way if anyone has additional questions.
Sounds good. I do have one question, maybe to kind of start things off.
Sure.
What are some of the most common mistakes that you see from startups who are trying to use analytics but not really succeeding?
I think probably one of the most common things that will trip startups up is focusing on the wrong metrics. So people will focus on, I think, what I consider to be maybe more of a vanity metric, which is, they'll look at email opens and they'll kind of focus on like, well, we have engagement there. And I think the tricky bit there is that that's a really good supporting operational metric. Obviously, we need to have good, open rates. We need to have good click-throughs. Deliverability is huge. But if you're focusing on just that one, you're kind of missing the bigger picture of that engagement. Unfortunately, is not supporting the business growth and scaling if it's not converting into an opportunity. And so that's why I think it's important to focus on the metrics that I included at the top of the talk, because those are the metrics that are really allowing you to focus on, is my funnel doing what it's supposed to do in converting leads and then helping them to sale. So again, I think it's just important to focus on, if you are, I'm not saying that obviously that type of engagement is not important. I'm just saying it needs to ladder back into the high level metric of, are we actually converting? Are things actually turning into sales? I got a question in the chat. What do you consider a good conversion rate for leads by email? Okay, great question. And you may not like my answer, but I think it really depends. You have to have a benchmark. So, I can't really say that, a 50% conversion rate for one company is great and it's crap for another. It's difficult to say without knowing what your baseline is. Obviously, I think we would all agree that like anything above 75% is amazing, but I don't know what your mix looks like. I don't know what your standard benchmarks are, so it's really hard for me to say that. But what I would say is track, your benchmarks. Look at, where are you on a, standard basis. Test. Look at what you can do to test. Make sure you split people into, control and hypothesis groups, and make sure that you're isolating a variable so you're not mixing things into your test. But track it and then see where the bumps are, and that's what's going to give you that differential. I think the last thing I'll also say is, if you've got targets and you're outperforming your targets, obviously shout that from the rooftops, and really know what's driving that strong performance so that you can continue to replicate it.
Another quick question around one of the items that you mentioned earlier. So lead scoring is something that I think is pretty interesting, and something that kind of we've, at least at my organization, has gotten into a little bit more. Would love to hear some of your thoughts around, as you are looking at MQLs, and we call them SQLs. I think you called them SQOs. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Sales accepted opportunities. Anything.
Or sorry, sales accepted opportunities. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what goes into lead scoring and how you would define those different marketing qualified and sales accepted sort of levels?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe it'll be helpful if I start backwards. So what typically I've seen, as a qualification for that sales accepted level is typically inside sales or sales saying yes, checking the box. In Salesforce, maybe it's depending on whatever CRM you use, but let's just use Salesforce as an example. In Salesforce, it's actually an opportunity and there's pipeline attached to it, and so that's kind of it. There are other things that I've seen companies do. You can do a little bit about tracking what actually qualifies an opportunity, and you can kind of say like, all of our opportunities have these personas attached. They all are focused on a specific product, et cetera, et cetera. There's obviously a lot that goes into there, and then kind of a step prior to that, what makes a marketing qualified lead, and how do you incorporate lead scoring for that? Lead scoring is really based on the activities that you focus on most in your marketing automation or in your marketing program, and all of that is based around just assigning point value to specific activities, and then automating that point value. So you basically are able to look at someone's score and say, okay, they've got a score of 15. That's our threshold. We needed them to do 3 5-point activities, and they've done all of those. Those 3 5-point activities could be downloading a form, attending a webinar, and then maybe even saying, raising their hand in some fashion on the website or an email and saying, hey, actually, I'd like to talk to someone about a question I have. Another option there might even be a chat if you've got a chatbot on your website. So just a few examples. lead scoring could honestly be like its own whole topic. So maybe next week or next year, Ben, we can do something like that. But the lead scoring portion is really, marketers and even sales, if you've got that kind of relationship, sitting down and saying, what are the key activities? You might be weighting some activities more. You might say, hey, a webinar attendance is enough to qualify them. If they come to one webinar and they sit through half of it, we're good. We need to call them. And other people may have more of a mix where they're saying, I want a few different activities, like I just mentioned.
Thanks.
Cool. I got one more question in here, and I think that will probably be our last one. I've seen companies run campaigns but feel like they don't understand what is succeeding. They don't understand data in GA, or it conflicts with other data in their database. And I think you mean Google Analytics there. The sense of no single source of truth. Yes. Okay. 100%. I totally feel your pain. So I hope that I don't sound too much like a broken record, but I think the biggest thing here is really deciding what your success metrics are. So, the Google Analytics data, there might be 3 items in there that you should just plain focus on. I think nowadays, with just how technology-based marketing is, it's really easy to get into that data overload, and it's like, okay, I've got 100 KPIs that I could track. I think we all know, like, there's no way tracking 100 KPIs is going to lead to success. So I would base that around, like I said, success metrics. So focus on what's the key metric that you want to track. I think another good point that you made is how it conflicts with other data in their database. So again, here what I would recommend is take it channel by channel. You're probably using a lot of different channels, or at least you've got 3. You've got web, email, and some type of event channel, whether that's webinars, virtual events, etc. And so I would really, look at all of the different channels and just break down at a really simple level, what is the most meaningful metric for each of those. I think that, in some cases that's a controversial conversation to have with different leaders, but I do think it's possible to land on a success point and say, okay, for email, it's the number one thing we care about is content downloads, and for web, the number one thing we care about is net new names, et cetera, et cetera. That, while it doesn't solve the single source of truth issue, I think it helps with the conflicting data issue, because some of that conflicting data, it's a non-starter. If it's not even an important metric, you're kind of having a circular conversation around it. So I recommend focusing on the top metrics for the top channels, or maybe not even top, just across all the different channels that you have, and then building out what matters from there, getting buy-in from sales and product, and then running with that from there. I hope that helps. There's also stuff we can get into there's like actually ETLing or extracting, transferring, and loading data. That is a whole nother conversation, and it's also requires a very sophisticated relationship with IT. So it's possible, if you're interested in that, I would actually recommend that you just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can have coffee or something, or virtual coffee, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But the single source of truth, I think, is something a lot of people struggle with, and it's there can be ways around it, especially as you're scaling. It's like sometimes you don't, maybe this is controversial, but maybe you don't need a single source of truth. You can focus on what's working in the specific channels, and then you can run with it from there. Awesome. Okay, well, I think it's just a few minutes over, so I'm gonna stop us, but thank you all so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope it was helpful. And if it wasn't, let me know. Always looking for feedback. But otherwise, thank you all so much for listening to me. And Ben, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to volunteer during Boulder Startup Week and share your experience. I think that's what makes Boulder Startup Week so special. So Again, really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you to everyone who's joining right now, all of the attendees, for making sure that we have our sessions. Like I said, this will be uploaded to the Boulder Startup Week YouTube channel probably in the next week or so. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Thanks so much. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye.